to all the testimonies. It gives me strength to continue and keep pressing into the place we must go as a nation, as a people. Oftentimes I have to come by and hear other people on the front line doing what unquestionably is the heart of the Savior and recognizing social injustice and laying down their lives. No greater love that a man has than this, than one that will lay down his life for his friends. And I'm pretty free. I just very open and honest, try to communicate my heart to people, to let them know that unquestionably the future of this nation really does not rest in the White House or the Congress itself. And in this time and in this state of mind that we find ourselves in, we live in a world of deception, of lies, and hypocrisies. But yet God determined that you'd be born for such a time as this. God said, where is the people that will stand for me, that will speak for those whose voices cannot be heard? Who will defend the defenseless? And who will not yield to the social oppression? Whose voice will stand and speak? And he said, well, I've decided that there will be a group, there'll be a remnant. And when you look across the table, and when you hear the fervency and the love and the power of those who have come before me, you recognize that God is in heaven looking on your efforts and recognizing that you will be determining the future of this country. You're so desperately needed. And so with that, I say to you, first of all, the civil rights movement continues on. The deception is that anyone who is trying to commandeer a cause often wants to rob that term in order to ensure their success. That is deception. This civil rights movement is a movement of conscience. And I don't mind, because I've run as a Democrat, I've run as a Republican, I've run as an independent, I've run as anything you want me to do. Because it's not so much the labels that men and women put on you, it's the conscience and the walk that you have before God that determines your values, and determines your perception, and determines your understanding of law. Augustine had said that any law that does not reflect God's law is no law at all. And so therefore we understand that in the society today we can have unjust laws. As has been stated, Roe versus Wade, 1973, make no mistake about it, is an unjust law. Focus. But a civil right is a birthright. Why was slavery wrong? Because men and women were enslaved solely because of the color of their skin. Something that I can do nothing about. I'll be African American when I was born, I'll be African American when I die. And so ethnicity, I have no say-so in. So therefore, if I'm born on this terra firma, then I have a civil right. And so when Martin Luther King stood in 1963, he said America had become a schizophrenic nation. Because he said, well, we hold these truths to be self-evident that all mankind was created equal and endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights. Rights you cannot take away. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Martin, in his speech, The American Dream, Drew University, New Jersey, he said, never before has a socio-political document so eloquently and profoundly expressed the sacredness of human personality. What document? We hold these truths to be self-evident. That all mankind was created equal, endowed by the Creator. What we call the pro-life movement. But it is the civil rights movement. Because that declaration is being totally ignored. 1973, the final analysis of the Supreme Court decision, they said, well, we don't know when life begins. It is now 2013. Well, before 2013, with the new research that we have, embryoscopy, and all the things that basically can clearly state, and if there's any students in here, there's not a biology book in the world that will not say and tell you, or tell you plainly, life begins at conception. Of course, me being a very practical person, I now step back objectively and say, well, if you didn't know then, you do know now. Why haven't you righted the wrong? Ruth Bader Ginsburg basically said, well, there's no sense of repealing it because abortion has become a part of our society. Basically, she was saying that our consciences have eroded enough that the law can remain as it is. Our denial of God's law can definitely now be clearly seen, and that indeed that as a nation we no longer revere God's law. So we now can allow Roe versus Wade to remain the most. Where unquestionably that God needs a voice and a remnant the most. So we can understand how God is grieved when church folks are wondering what trimester it's in. We have to be those voices and say, long before a trimester, God had made an appointment. The civil rights movement unquestionably is a movement that cannot cease until victory is achieved. And you are that movement. Isn't it then ironic that you hear someone attempting to have an abortion claiming it's a civil right? Without any examination of the simple fact is intellectually dishonest to claim a right for yourself, and in so doing, take away the right of somebody else. You can't claim a civil right and then eliminate someone else's civil right. Civil rights basically say I have the right to be born. You can't say because I'm poor or I'm going to have dire straits or be in difficulty when I'm being born, because that declaration says I have the right to pursue happiness. Meaning, I may not be too happy in the conditions by which I'm born. If you're pursuing something, it means you don't have it. You cannot cut off my right to pursue happiness. Our views, our understanding, and I can never, once again, empathize totally in that decision-making process. But as you know, our Down syndrome persons is something getting up to like 90% are eliminated. Because somebody perceived that they couldn't pursue happiness. Somebody said you will not have a viable future. Or conceived by rape and incest. I understand, I didn't possibly understand, but I try to understand the pain that's involved when a woman would have to go through that. But the person who led me to the Library of Congress and did my study was a product of rape and incest. If you enjoy the 16th chapel, Michelangelo, he was a product of rape and incest. If you ask the African American community, who was the most legendary jazz person, they would say Louis Armstrong. He's a product of rape and incest. If you would ask Billy Graham, who was the most anointed singer that he ever had on his team, he would tell you Ethel Waters. She was a product of rape and incest. The list is endless, by the way, of those who have made viable contributions, who were given the right to pursue happiness and not only found it for themselves, but found it for others. I'm not justifying anyone. I'm not trying to cause blame on anyone. You know, Dr. King also, he said, where the darkness is, the people will sin. Therefore, it's not so much the people who sin, it's those that create the darkness. Judges in 1973 created darkness. To hold those women, to cover those women, to counsel those women. And he chooses you and I to do that. To let them know what they're feeling is something that only God can fill the void for. But they were lied to. And the constant deceptions, you need to understand. You live in these constant deceptions, and there's a generation that comes up, and some would even repeat. But it's been noted already, the younger generation is beginning, because of Google, because of access to information, is beginning to question those lies. They're looking at the viability. They're in school. They're reading the language, and they're beginning to understand that, 18 days heartbeat, 48 days brainwaves, 62 days, 65 days sucking their thumb. That is a baby. But you got to understand, they can go to Princeton and hear Peter Singer say that child is not viable until 2. And you're teaching in one of the most renowned universities in the world, and you're telling students that the child is not viable to 2 years of age. Where is the cry? Where is the outcry? Why? But our consciences are being constantly eroded. Day by day, the deception, the sales, the marketing. Because the dream, the American dream that you're searching for, they say, that pregnancy, that child will impede you from being your best. Now, you got to understand that in the African American community, let me use the example, she's just left for her first year, probably one of the first in her family to go to college. She's at Brown, she's at Dartmouth, she's at Spelman. And through one indiscretion, on one weekend, she finds herself pregnant. The counsel around that young lady at the school is going to tell her one thing. Does she want to call the hairdresser where mom is at, who's bragging about her being the first to go away? Is she going to tell her dad, who so proudly sends her that $1 or $2 and encourages her and say, keep it up, dear? What do you think she's going to do? The pressure is immense. voice of reason. And God says, I need voices of reason because that indiscretion I can cover. I can have her take a break. I can have her take the time. She can achieve her goals if you help. But to terminate, she will live for and live with the rest of her life. And if 52% of all African Americans pregnancies end in abortion, by the way, that's Alan Guttmacher, who is the research author for Planned Parenthood. I'm not making these figures up. And by the way, they would unquestionably have to be somewhat conservative because not every state has to report. So I can comfortably say that that data is accurate. And I can comfortably understand and know that indeed, if that is the so, and I've been called to ministry, it's happening on my watch. It's happening in my lifetime. It's happening while I was given the baton to stand for righteousness. And if you did not know, the civil rights movement was based on righteousness. It was nonviolent. And so you have to also then protect your conscience. You got to take defeats. I still can't understand how anybody allows a Nancy Pelosi to come back into politics. I just can't understand. Who are these people? Do I have to take a litmus test? Sometimes for Harry Reid's folks, it was in I said, I don't understand this. Now, I'm not saying we're great now. I don't even want to go there. I really don't embrace either too well. Because the value system, I applaud Ted Cruz, because he represented his constituency. I thought that's what you were supposed to do. And if we gain the whole world and lose his soul. He says it's better for you to tie a millstone around your neck and throw yourself into the sea than to harm one of my, you know the actual word is? Fetus. I said it means little one. He said it'd be better for you to do that. I encourage you, this team you have is awesome, that you continue to press in and understand that your conscience will be under the attack each and every day, because evil knows that if it can dull your conscience and get you in any way, form, or fashion to acquiesce away from the foundations of the scripture, you will falter and grow weary in well-doing. Is it systemic? It has always been systemic. Is it by design? Yes, it is by design. Make no mistake. Margaret Sanger, who was the master of strategy, she knew that she couldn't control the society that she wanted to control, its numbers, by allowing the name of Birth Control League to remain. Margaret Sanger, she's the head of the Birth Control League, and she believed in eugenics. And by the way, it just wasn't African Americans. It was Irish. It was Italians. She just had it really in for the African Americans. It's fact. Anyone whom she deemed was not desirable. You got to understand that she tutored, along with Paul Luther, I forgot Paul Luther, he tutored the Third Reich. Tutored. Hitler commended the eugenics movement in the United States. Commended. So what happened? After Germany, after 1945, nobody really wanted to hear that word, eugenics. So she changed the name. Didn't change the staff. Didn't change the players. She just changed the name. She changed it to Planned Parenthood. Objectives and goals still the same. Mandate still the same. Receiving hundreds of thousands of your tax dollars. And now, due to a promise, I got to give him credit. He made Planned Parenthood a promise. July 7th, 2007. He stood before Planned Parenthood. Matter of fact, the only president that actually campaigned with Planned Parenthood in the swing states. Why? Because either people were ignorant or their conscience was seared, and so they thought that was a good thing. He said the first thing he would do was to pass the Freedom of Choice Act. What is the Freedom of Choice Act? Abortion on demand. Taxpayer paid. Omitting how they're going to do this, but they have their ways. Obviously, no one values truth, and the Constitution, according to the Hyde Amendment, you're not supposed to be able to do that. But he promised. So what happened? Freedom of Choice Act got to be a bad name. So he just changed it. He slipped it in somewhere. Where did he put it in? The Affordable Health Care Act. And for all you who don't know, Obamacare and the Affordable Health Care Act was the same thing. It's in there. And if it continues unimpeded, they are projecting that abortions will go up over 115,000 a year. Just from the signature. But it's a little bit more than that. Just from a people's whose conscience is becoming dull. Why does the movement be important? Why I'm unquestionably a study of the civil rights movement? Because the language is the same and is applicable today. If we had listened to the last prophets of the civil rights movement, you would have never embraced a value system that was not yours. I say that to African Americans. Why do I say that? Because Martin said, do not judge a man by the color of his skin. Do not be happy because someone your color is in the White House. Do not forget everything I taught you based on the fact that somebody of your color will sit in the highest office in the land. I charge you. He said, do not judge a man by the color of the skin, but by the content of his value system. Dr. King, on the Sunday before his death, he said, there comes a time when one must take the position that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because conscience tells him to do it. Your conscience tells you. He'll never be in the pulpit again on another Sunday. That's one of the last things he says. Your conscience will tell you. Your conscience will tell you, and you can ignore worrying about your safety. Your conscience will tell you, and you won't worry about what's politically correct. Your conscience will tell you, and you won't worry about being popular. You know, pastors always worry about being popular. We think if we're unpopular, our churches won't grow. Can't have a message to make people mad with me. It's kind of rough on pastors. But pastors are to communicate conscience. They are the shepherds of the flock. And we're leading the sheep to the slaughter. So Martin said, don't count me amongst those. I must do it because conscience tells me it is right. And so therefore, your conscience, don't let it die. Don't let the verbiage, the deception, the lies. Have you ever lived in a time where there's so much lies? I am amazed at the lying. And it's almost like people say, well, I guess they're supposed to because they're politicians. It's okay to get your call. Do you know that's communism? That's the manifesto of communism. You can lie and cheat and steal to reach your end. America was supposed to take the high road. America was supposed to be based on the values of truth. It was America that said, in God we trust. And you are called to bring America back to that. And to recognize that sacredness of human personality. I close with this quote. E equals MC squared. Albert Einstein. He said this. Never do anything against conscience, even when the state demands it. He's speaking to you now. Because conscience exceptions are strict, and they're asking doctors, hospitals, people not to have conscience. You don't understand how evil this is. I have to follow Einstein. I have to follow Martin. If there's a law that's going to strip me of conscience, I can't bow to it. It's just simple. And neither can you. God bless you.